All right, guys, so welcome to this fourth episode of the COVID survival series. The reason why we are doing this is so that we are able to bring different topics and discourses and conversations to whoever is interested in listening to this and whoever can benefit from this. We started on Monday and we're doing this daily series at least till next week. This week we are focusing a whole lot more on the softer issues, the mind issues, the heart issues, the emotional issues. Next week we plan to go more into the actionable, like how do we remain productive while working from home? How do we bring our businesses online? So those things are more likely to happen from next week onwards. It has been quite an experience so far hearing the inputs from all the conversations with the different panelists over the last 3 days. Some really valuable nuggets of wisdom and reflection has been brought to the fore. And having evolved through the 3 days, I think we have come to this stage today where for the first time in the 5 years that I've been running Up Your Game, I felt comfortable enough to have a conversation around the topic of faith. We have usually shied away from this because people, it's a bit controversial, right? People usually feel that discussing faith and religion should not be something that a secular community should be doing, or a mass market community should be doing, because then you are tending to propagate certain ideas and messages and ideologies, and you might exclude certain groups who think in a certain way as well. But I guess the discussion today is not going to be so much based on religious lines, but it's going to be looking at faith in itself. What is the meaning of faith? What's the concept of faith? Why faith is important, especially in times of crisis or in times of uncertainty or in times when we are laden with a lot of fear. From faith, we could also talk about beliefs, we could also talk about values, and we can refer to traditions, we can refer to scriptures and texts to draw learnings from them as sources of reference information that has been around for hundreds or thousands of years. So this is in no means meant to go down a religious path to preach religion, but I guess the discourse and discussion here in your own individual capacity is a reflection of the learnings that we can collectively get from the diverse mediums and channels that is available to us now and through history, right? So we have tried our best to curate a panel that's as diverse as possible. You guys come from different backgrounds, different fields of professional work, different fields of interest. Some of you are professionally involved in the interfaith arena. Some of you are doing it as a work of passion. Some of you are researchers in the field for personal consumption. Some of you do it for the benefit of the communities that you are a part of. So you are as diverse as can be. So let me get started with the introductions. We have Faheema. So Faheema is heading up the Interreligious Organization. At the same time, she is also running, let me get this right, HashPeace. Yeah, so she has been involved in the interfaith and community activism space for quite a while now. And so it'll be very interesting to hear her perspective as somebody who is in the center of this quite a bit. What can we understand by faith in itself? We have Rinchin. Rinchin has started this Dharma series where she writes pieces on different aspects. The ones that I was reading was on the Ramayana, and that was pretty interesting. So Rinchin, we look forward to having your thoughts on this. What lessons can we draw from everything that you've understood and you have been sharing so far? Fiona is a coach, is a facilitator, but she is also a practicing Buddhist, and she has always brought some very interesting concepts to the fore. Every time I've had a conversation with her, she has been able to introduce something that's enlightening and linking it to real life applications where we can draw some valuable lessons from there. So that's Fiona. We have Malminder. Malminder has been in the world of journalism for a while, and then he was doing corp comms for a research institute as well. And I think, Malminder, you're back now to journalism again. You're with, so you're back now in journalism again. So we have Malminder as well. And then we have Basil. Basil was introduced to me by Faheema. So we just had a conversation this afternoon, in fact, and I was very fascinated. So Basil currently is heading his own interfaith foundation. but at the same time, he was in training to become a Catholic priest for 9 years. Was it 9 years? Yeah, it was for 9 years. He was in training to become a Catholic priest, and he decided not to pursue that. But in fact, he has now come into the community space, and he has got some really good plans as well. So we have a very diverse range of people on this panel, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing some of your inputs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with first asking you to share a bit more about yourselves. You will have 2 minutes each to do this. So try to keep it crisp, concise, and sharp so that we are able to have more time with more sharing from everyone as well. So Faheema, let's start with you.
Rahul said, I'm working at IRO. It's a 70-year-old organization. It's been about 1 year and about 6-7 months since I joined. So representing 10 religions. And the idea really much is to promote a lot of friendship and understanding between these 10 religions. But I think 5 years ago, I started a hash piece, which deals with racial and religious harmony in general. So, and the focus is on doing a lot of advocacy on social harmony in general. And I think my interest a lot stemmed from the problem that that is faced by the society in terms of religious extremism, and how radicalization has grown because of the kind of narratives that's been put online, and how the concept of faith itself has been used against the society at large. So that's how I came into this this field of work, and I guess I'm one of those people who can say this is definitely passion. Like I wake up for it. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much, Faheema. And is it true that that Prince William had the pleasure of sitting next to you at one of the events?
I know. You know what saddens me about this entire thing? Everybody only remembers Prince William. He was Prince Charles, and nobody. It was Prince Harry, and nobody remembers Prince Harry.
That's so sad.
I know. Everybody's like, "Oh, you sat next to Prince William." I'm like, "No, I sat next to the brother."
No, so you know that, okay, people forgot who was sitting next to you, but people remember that you were sitting next to someone, right?
Well, I guess that's the good thing about it. So I think when he came, they wanted a youth leader to host him, and it was very good because I had a chance to sit next to him and really tell about the work we do to as young Muslims to counter, the threats of ISIS, recruitment narratives and all. And I think one thing he said, which was also the reason that catalyzed was, I think he said, like, if people who are so determined to destroy the society are persistent, then those who want to spread peace should be even more determined. That also sort of made me wonder why this field of harmony works has been that aggressive as should be. Like I think Basil and I know that sometimes we feel that the circle has to expand. We end up seeing the same people. So I think meeting him definitely boosted XXL me. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much, Faheema. Let's hear from Fiona next.
Hi everyone, my name is Fiona. So I have been learning and trying to understand Dharma for maybe about 7 years. And I'm a very active volunteer with Asian Classics Institute. You can search for them online. So they have a project which is trying to save a lot of ancient classics in the world as well. And there's the founder, who is Geshe Michael Roach. He's American and he's a Geshe, and he actually helps us to distill a lot of all these essences to how we actually apply it in our daily life. So this is how I came about learning and being very passionate about this subject and helping and using it as tools to actually bring a lot more insight about life to people. So this is what I do.
Great, thank you so much, Fiona. Looking forward to hear your insights once more and again. Let's go on to Rinchin.
Hi everybody, my name is Rinchin. On the professional side, I'm a learning consultant. So I basically help companies like Google and PayPal with their learning abilities. From the religious and spiritual part of it, I've grown up in a very religious household, but I've had my own journey of discovering, of revolting, rebelling, and then, kind of coming back together on the religious front, exploring religion on my own. I completely agree with Fahima on the kind of challenges that we face on the religious fronts. And there's one thing that I've learned in this whole journey of especially looking into Hindu Dharma is that somebody really nicely pointed it out, saying that, all religions are like fingers pointing at just one moon. So, that's been my journey so far. I've been trying to explore Hinduism for now, but I also, I usually look at the parallels that can be drawn from the Bible or from the Quran, even, other religions. So that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rinchin. Let's hear from Basil.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Basil. So I've just recently started my own interfaith company, doing consultancy work on anything that has a bit of an interfaith lens. So what we do really is help communities tweak the process of dialogue to build a more versatile diversity. So basically, it's all about process, right? How can we improve the process of dialogue such that people are talking to each other better, listening to each other better. And in that regard, just building the diversity that's already natural in many of our communities, but making it more versatile. As Rahul said, I was in Catholic religious life for about 9 years of my life. So I've got training in both philosophy and theology, with both Eastern religions and especially Christianity, of course. But my areas of focus are in the area of spirituality, interreligious dialogue specifically, and also I've got a deep passion in this new trend that's happening in the religious environment, which is this growth of what's known as the spiritual but not religious. So people who are sort of leaving religious institutions, but they're still holding on to a kind of faith in the divine, in the supernatural, in the spirit, like in the sort of the spiritual realm. So that's a very deep interest of mine as well. And one last thing, together with Faheema, I am also a member of the interreligious organization. So it's my passion, both volunteer and professionally. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Basil. Let's hear from Malminda.
Hi, thanks, Rahul. So as Rahul mentioned, I'm a journalist by profession. Been that for a while. I right now work with Channel News Asia as the editor on their digital news platform. But besides that, involved in several initiatives with the community, including in the interfaith segment, as well as in the Sikh community. So the Sikh community, I used to head something called the Young Sikh Association. I'm not so young anymore, so I'm not involved there anymore actively. But I'm currently serving with the Sikh Advisory Board, which is, which some of you may be familiar with. It is the advisory body to the government on all matters pertaining to the Sikh community. So I serve as the secretary of the Sikh Advisory Board. So I guess with that respect, also connected to different faith groups and different people from different walks of life. So I mean, as some of you would know, being familiar with Sikhism, Sikhism and interfaith aren't mutually exclusive. So I guess you could say that being active in Sikhism also means I'm active in interfaith work. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mel. So Malminda, since you're on, let's start with you. Let's start by asking all of you on the panel. So what's your observation of the situation that we are in, where the world is at right now? It has been quite a while since the virus started spreading, and a lot of countries are in lockdown. Singapore is in day 3 of the circuit breaker mode. So what's your assessment of this? So Malminda, let's start with you first.
Okay, so from a professional point of view, of course, I have a very different assessment of this. I've been talking to a lot of epidemiologists and experts, and we put out a lot of stories and a lot of commentaries on this on a daily basis. So I have a bias in that sense. But if I put on a strictly spiritual or religious lens, then I would say that this is an act of God. That's what many Sikhs believe in as well, and there's a reason for that. I mean, if I have the time to share tonight with you guys. I'm happy to go deeper into why I think that's the case. But yeah, I think it's an act of God. But I also think it's a very difficult time for entire humankind. I mean, if we just look at this month alone, I mean, there's so many of us from different faiths celebrating important milestones, whether it's the opening of the Ramadan month, whether it's Good Friday, Vesak Day, Vaisakhi, the Hindu New Year. There's so many things that are happening. And the fact that we don't have access to our places of worship, the fact that we can't congregate as we would normally have done, I think that's a major pain point for many people. And many people will be questioning the validity of that. But it's important to, I think, look at the bigger picture. Important to understand why this is happening, if indeed you do accept the point that it is an act of God, or that it is happening because of bigger reasons as well. Yeah, so I will hold my comments for later on. I'm assuming there'll be a discussion on this, and happy to hear what the others feel about it.
Great, thank you, Malminder. Let's hear from Basil. Basil, what have you been observing, and what's your sense of this?
I really am taking this as a learning experience for humanity. I don't think, at least in recorded history, we've had something so global and something where everybody is sharing such similar experiences on this planet, plus just during the time of the internet as well, so we can actually connect to people all over the world who are experiencing this at the same time. It's an interesting common experience for us as species. Right? So for me, it really connotes a lot of divine human relationship sense, right? Because this doesn't feel like it's just happening to one person or one particular community. It's like the whole of the human race, right? So for me, it's like, if you look at scriptures, and I'm thinking of the Christian scriptures, you see this relationship really being the focus, right? The relationship between God and his people, right? What people are doing, what the divine is doing. So that's just sort of giving me a very spiritual lens to a lot of this. But also, if I were not to look at just spirituality, but just what people are facing, I mean, there's a lot of suffering and hardship, especially the people who have been infected, the people who have passed away, and their relatives, their family members. But as for many of the rest of us, we are also going through something very interesting, where especially with the stay-home guidelines that have been given just sort of worldwide in different ways, you know, in different countries, but basically worldwide, we've had this, what I would call this, narrative disruption, right? We all have a certain movement in our lives, a certain story that we play out in our lives. And we've suddenly had this disruption to our narratives, to the way we find meaning in our lives. So if people suddenly staying home, being apart from their communities, being apart from the things that make them familiar, being apart from their roles, it's given a very interesting opportunity for something that actually does get highlighted in religious traditions, this sense of being apart, this sense of distancing. In many scriptures, we see this idea of people moving away from their communities, being isolated, going into the dark, going into the desert, and transforming somehow, becoming new, finding new meaning, and then re-entering society again. So I'm just wondering if, as bad as this situation is, and I know it is it also a potential learning opportunity for all of us to find new meanings in our lives and new meaning as a species? So that's the way I'm looking at things right now.
Great, thank you so much, Basil. I think that was a very interesting perspective, you know, that we are all forced to return back into our caves so that we can reset ourselves and come back out to civilization again.
Yeah.
Right? Great. So we have that. Rinchin, let's hear from you.
So I look at it from different perspectives. First one is, of course, that my heart goes out for everybody who's been suffering because of that, and and their extended families and friends. especially the deceased and the people who are working every day to make sure that we are all doing well. I mean, while they are on charge and on guard, but at the same time, their families, I can't even imagine what they're going through. So my heart and prayer goes out to those people. Another way of looking at it is also from the perspective of us being social animals. And it has really hit us hard at this time to realize that while we talk about social media being a point of connection, but somewhere everyone is feeling, that sense of connection is lost just because we are not able to meet people in person. So, that ability to get in touch with people again, meeting people face to face, is something that everybody is kind of lacking right now, and they're looking forward to it. That's another look, that's another point of it. From the spiritual perspective, what I've realized is that people are now facing two things. It's either a high sense of fear or a high sense of faith. All right. So, there's fear that, what if it never ends? What if it just keeps on going? But then there is another section which is looking at it from an introspection level, saying, why, if we can't look at the outside right now, it's the time that we dwell inside ourselves and see, introspect, think about how can we utilize this time to mull over not just at our personal gains. We all have our personal ambitions, but we are looking at it from a community level, how we can help the community. Everybody's thinking about, all right, tomorrow if I go out, am I going to be socially more responsible? At the same time, our need for the consumerism is going down. We are looking at the basic survival instincts, but at the same time, we are also looking at a more community level support together. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Rinchin. We'll come back to some of those points that you mentioned for sure. Fiona.
Okay. So from the very broad-based perspective, in Dharma, as we all know, there is always this idea of cause and effect. So meaning something that we have created in the past will create our future or our current situation. So, but what does that really mean? Basically is there is a reason for why all this is happening right now. And the reason actually will differ from person to person. For some, it may be an opportunity. For some, it may be looking for spiritual answers. For some, it may be having to struggle, in fact, with a lot of the emotions and the sense of loss, for example, if they're not able to go out, not able to lead the normal life, so-called, that they have. But in terms of Buddhism in a more deeper sense, there are certain parts of us that actually have been emphasizing on things like, meditation, on keeping our practices. So some of these tools actually come in handy nowadays in terms of being reconnected with ourselves to actually go deeper in our spiritual practices. So actually, there are a lot of perspectives. Of course, it's difficult for a lot of people, and the psychology aspect definitely is very, very least talked about in the normal lives of how people are actually coping with staying at home and just suddenly losing their social lives altogether. But there are reasons and there are answers for all of these, which I will go in with probably a little deeper later, but that's to give my broad-based insight for now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And let's come to Faheema.
Islam for us is everything is determined by God, and we also have the concept that God really tests you. So for me, I initially was like, this is just one of the many tests, maybe slightly a bigger exam, maybe, or something like that. So for me, I wouldn't say it kind of hit me too shock, because I think the idea of being tested and being it's always certain things are the way it's as we say, in Islam, it's it's as Allah wills. For us, that's something that's ingrained. So to me, it's willed. Okay. I wouldn't say I was too hard in adjusting to that. I think every generation does sort of face something. Am I lagging? Okay. So I think every generation seems to face some kind of, a pandemic or a experience of something at a community at large. I guess I don't know whether, like sometimes when I reflect, I don't know whether for our generation, the convenience and sometimes the luxury we've enjoyed so much makes this something that is extremely hard to grasp when it comes to, oh, this is a situation that we are facing. Of course, not undermining the grief, the seriousness of the issue, but of the convenience we've been having, that this appears too hard to grasp. Take, for example, one thing. I wake up in the morning and I see people posting on their Facebook about how difficult it is to be at home working with kids. I was telling Basil, when did that become such a difficult thing? It must be because our generation has enjoyed the luxury to the level that, this has become a chore, a task. So I don't know whether it's a relative issue. It's because we have seen something so good. We're so blessed. We're so the generation of the technology and everything, that suddenly all this shutdown and stuff like that has. So I think early on in this, I've sort of put myself into that reflection. So I've adjusted. When the circuit started itself, the first 2 days I fasted. Okay, I really needed to control my emotions, and I believe that one of the things about about having a religion or having a faith, sometimes it anchors you to certain rituals, right? So when I fasted, I think the first 2 days I could abstain from a lot of emotions, apart from the food. So I think my emotions were controlled at the first 2 days. I didn't absorb a lot, and usually when I fast as well, I reduce my social media readings. Not my personal activities, but I definitely cut down the readings, because the first 2 days was people were sharing their experience and all was good, but whatever is being shared will also affect your psychology. It will plant into you ideas that you never thought you feel, you see. So the fasting helped, and I think for me, at least so far, the faith has helped me to kind of find a consoling aspect to this entire experience. I think for me, without that, I will probably be ranting around and frustrated. Lifestyle-wise, not much difference. I'm working morning to night, like as usual. And my WhatsApp chatters are always on as usual. I'm at home with my kids and looking at stuff, and I'm seeing Basil or Malminda, a lot of these people who I always see online, talking about interfaith. So not much difference. What I miss is definitely right now the Amoy Street Food Center. That's what I miss a lot. I think more than social, I think I'm missing the physical, just the physical realm, that's all. So so far, I think because of the a lot of religious teachings, especially in Islam, how it has been, because for me, generally, when it comes to Islam, I focus a lot on the history. So looking back at it, it has helped me anchor. But then again, it's just the second or third day. So only God will know what happens to me next week.
We'll check in on you, Faheema. We'll make sure you're okay. But you raise a very interesting point. It's like when did taking care of our children become a chore, and is it because we are not used to it? And I think that's pretty much it, because if I look at my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, when you had a child in the house, there was an entire community or a village to raise the child. You had grandparents and you had uncles and aunties and you had everybody around. And if I would take my own example for a start, right before my wife gave birth, I moved about 12, 15 kilometers away from my parents, right? Yeah, in Bedok, I'm in Pongo. And every time I talk to my parents, they make it sound like I moved to another country. So it's like you don't have, your parents are not like at the next block in the same house. There is no extended family. So it's me, my wife, we're both working. 6-month-old baby, you have to leave him in the infant care so that you get some space to go and work and come back, pick him up. Now with this, suddenly you have an infant in the house who's just learning how to roll around and he's tumbling everywhere. And you still need to get your work done. The wife has her deadlines to meet from her office. You have your deadlines to meet for your own business. And it's a whole new experience, right? And suddenly you realize, oh my God, we were so not used to this. but now we have to find new routines and new ways of coping and dealing with this. And it takes a bit of time to do that, right? But in the midst of all of that, right, and I guess that's what creates the chaos and the anxiety, because it's new, and because it's new, there's a lot of unknown factors, there's a lot of variable components to be figured out, there's a lot of loose pieces to be tied in together, and like you said, we don't even know what's coming next. You know, what we know is what we are dealing with at the current point. But the mind always runs ahead of itself, right? We're always thinking about, oh my God, this is already so bad. How is it going to be next week? How is it going to be 2 weeks later? What if the cases really, what if this becomes a 2-month lockdown instead of a 1-month lockdown? How are we going to manage and cope in the long term? And this is only with regards to family, not mentioning people's incomes, careers, businesses suffering losses, cost of, operating costs keep running. People are over leveraged. They've got too much debts that they take on in terms of unsecured loans or credit cards. So there's so many factors that are just weighing down on people. And when I was having a conversation with a lot of our expert panels over the last few days, some of them were psychologists, some of them were mindfulness experts, some of them were meditation practitioners. They all agreed on one thing, that you just have to learn how to let go, seize control, and just be in the present moment. And that is what brought me to this discussion of faith, that because if you are going to surrender to something, you're going to surrender to something, right? Now, what's that something? I can't surrender to the government, right? Because the government has already laid its cards out and said this is the parameters, right? You can't surrender to family, because in fact now all the more you can't even go to your grandparents' house, right? So you are asked to stay in your own space. So the only thing you can surrender to is a higher understanding, or trust in the universe, God, religion, some philosophy, some ideology. But the idea is, what is faith? So what is the definition of faith, and what does it mean to have faith? Does it have to be religious? Can it be non-religious? Does it have to be spiritual? Can it be philosophical? Can it be something else? What exactly would faith mean to you? So let's start with you, Faheema. Yeah, since you're still on.
Okay, so I think generally for me, into a family that not just subscribes to a particular religious system, but also sort of has a lot of traditions that tend to, mix with it. Like a lot of times in my family, I feel we are more traditionalists. We do certain things because that's how we have been doing, and that it mixes with the religion and all. So it's when you are sort of born in that kind of environment, it's very difficult to, suddenly say what's faith. Because it's not like I chose to come into this. Because faith to me requires a lot of, self-discovery. And so initially I'm like, so faith was, when people were talking about faith, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I just follow Islam and I'm fine with it. It works for me. And I don't think I'm going to dwell deep into what's faith and stuff. But I think recently, after coming into interfaith and everything, I think, with being people who learned of science, maths, how the world operates, how the virus actually works and why it came, the logical aspects of the world is something we kind of already have, comprehended. But beyond that, we still want to believe that there is a divine intervention that would come to sort of make things good or bad, or to put you in. I think for me, that's interfaith. There is a divinity above everything, and I believe it does exist beyond all the scientific, reasoning that I actually believe in as well. So for me, faith is belief in that divinity, and I hold very strong to it, and it's my choice to do so. But I only sort of came to this realization pretty much later in my life, and I think it has increased more ever since I joined, and I've started to see people from different religion. In fact, my recent conversation with Basil itself has changed my mindset so much about faith, So it's really, for me, faith is that, yeah.
All right, so Basil, since you have jinxed the mindset so much, let's hear from you, buddy.
Yes, and first of all, I have to apologize. I had to leave the screen just now because my speakers went off, and I think I missed about 2 minutes worth of audio just now, half of what you said and a bit of what Faheema said. So I'm just going to assume that I can guess at what she's just said, right? And I'll share a bit more on my opinion. You know, right now, from the stuff I've been hearing from my colleagues in interfaith, you know, some of them are Catholic retreat directors, some of them are Buddhist psychologists in like a Buddhist center, right? Or even Buddhist monks and a few ustas and ustazas. We're getting this sense, right, that people are feeling a little bit of angst. There's a new sort of frustration that's coming up in people because of a lot of the negative news that's out there in the world that several people have mentioned right now. And someone just shared with me yesterday, and he himself is a counselor, right? He actually goes hunting for negative news because he's become addicted to it, right? That's something new. There's a lot of negativity out there, and it's affecting people in a deep level. And something that Fiona mentioned earlier, right? There's a sense of loss. You know, I believe in God, and I also believe in religion, but I also sort of have learned that a lot of religion is a system. And you know, these various religions around the world are systems that have been influenced by man, right? And it's human beings trying to understand that relationship between us and this divine supernatural that we seem to have some sort of relationship with. And because of that, it feels like human beings have had to find a way in which this relationship, right, can explain some of our experiences. And one of the primary experiences that human beings go through is that of suffering, pain. And a lot of suffering is based on loss. But when people hear about loss, they tend to think about death. And I think that's really relevant in this situation of the pandemic because there is a lot of death. And that's a whole matter in itself, which is already creating a fear in many people. But there are other forms of losses that seem to be happening here. There's a loss of role, right? With people staying at home, right? What used to be a competent manager at the workplace, someone very skillful with his colleagues. He's now at home, you know, he has to get used to using Zoom like myself today, and you suddenly find yourself quite incompetent, right? Quite unskillful, right? So there's that sense of loss of your role. There's relationship loss for sure, because you are no longer with the social groups that are usually with. If you cannot even spend time with many of your friends, the communities that are usually around you, even your religious communities. So many of our religious institutions have been closed. Systemic loss. We are no longer part of many systems that we used to be in, right? Whether it's at the workplace, whether it's like me and the marketplace down below, like Faheema mentioned, was it Telok Ayer Street and the food courts over there, right? You're part of all these systems, these environments, and that's no longer part of you, right? Because you're stuck at home, it's a bit claustrophobic. There's even this sense of intra-psychic loss, you know, this sense of a way of thinking about yourself, your future, right? The world, your meaning of life. So all that, like we usually have daily, and it builds up. Our story builds bit by bit every single day. Now, all of a sudden, that story is just interrupted. We are in a very different environment, even though it's home, but we have not spent that much time at home, maybe while we're out there at work. So it's very new. And that newness just forces us into this sense, oh my goodness, I've lost something, but what is it? My suspicions are that over these next 6 to 8 weeks, many people will be going through inner experiences that they are not used to, right? I'd say people who have experienced things like depression or anxiety in the past, these things are going to start coming up even more so in this period. But even people who have never really tasted depression, right? Because they've been busy doing other things, right? Now suddenly, because of a lot of the losses, right, there are these symptoms of depression that they might go through. There are these expressions of grief that they're not used to. And because they're not used to, they might not know how to deal with it, and they might end up misunderstanding people, like conflicts with family members. I get into a lot of arguments with my mother right now, right? So that happens a lot. But even when you're on a Skype call with your colleagues at work, right? Like because of that lack of face-to-face, you miss out on the non-verbal cues. And because of that, there can be these misunderstandings, right? Hurt feelings that you hold inside, or because of the new environment on your screen, right? And everybody's navigating this in different ways, right? A lot of heightened emotions. So I'd say the next few weeks will be quite interesting in terms of the inner human being and the grief that's going to show, whether people realize it or not. And if my counselor friend, right, can notice he's having so much of these emotions coming up, and sometimes he misses it, he doesn't catch it in time, but he's trained as a counselor. And many of my retreat director friends, spiritual directors, they have this training, but most people in the world don't. So we're going to have a lot of these heightened, what I might call, this is in the field of like psycho-spirituality or intra-psychic feelings, right? Or we'll just call it emotional feelings, this lack of meaning, right? And they're going to express themselves in all sorts of funny little ways that people are not expecting. We are expecting a lot of material loss. We're expecting financial loss. But I think a lot of the emotional losses are not quite in people's minds right now. And I think over the next few weeks, it's going to start emerging. I might just add one last point. There is some parallel I'm starting to see between these experiences that people are going to go through at home and these coming up of these emotions to ancient traditions connected to retreats, connected to being away in the desert, connected to growth, connected to that sense of darkness and mystery. But for that, I can go into later on to give other people a chance to speak as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Fiona, since Basil started off by referring to you, why don't you go next?
Okay, sure. So I really like what Basil has shared in terms of the psychological and emotional parts of it. And I really agree. However, I do feel that maybe some of these have actually been underlying, just that they have not been poignant before in our lives. We might have used, for example, our work experiences to actually avoid some of the issues we have at home, or for example, maybe certain things that we didn't want to touch on with people closer to us. But because now we are in a confined space, more with our family and people around us, these problems seem to grow a little bit bigger than usual. And that's how, if people are not, how should I put it? If people are not really self-aware of these issues that they may have, it may actually kind of affect their lives in a bigger way than what it's supposed to be. So coming from the faith perspective is that I wasn't born in a very spiritual family. In fact, my parents raised us up as free thinkers. But me and my brother, we actually took different paths. So my brother became a Christian and I chose to become a Buddhist. For me, it was kind of logic, it was kind of values that helped me to develop deeper into understanding what life is all about. And I do agree with Faheema and everybody that we believe that there's something higher up there, including Rahul as well. There's something higher up there that we don't know what it is. But we always know and understand that success leaves clues, studies leaves clues, and especially history. So if we actually align ourselves with history and what's happening in our lives today, there are a lot of similarities, and actually why these are the things that will happen in the juncture of our lives, maybe because we have been bombarded by a lot of new and developing technologies to the point that we actually lost our personal human connection, so much so that there had to be a reset button to be pressed together at this point of time to help us to really kind of rethink and possibly have this space to actually try to fulfill the potential that we supposed to achieve and supposed to have. And that's why I believe that it's a time to press the reset button so that everybody can grow a lot more personally to what we should be or what we are meant to be. Yeah.
Great. So I think technology is a very interesting thing that we talk about, because I'm not quite sure how this whole relationship with technology and the current situation is, because a lot of people out there are saying that this is detox period where you cut away from technology, We have been overloaded with too much technology, too much mechanism. We forgot how to be humans. We forgot how to interact with one another. Now we are forced to be locked in with our family and loved ones and hit the pause button. On the other hand, it is actually technology that is keeping us afloat, right? It's technology that's helping us to get those tests out, the results of those tests out quicker, right? So it doesn't take 4 days anymore before after a nose swab for results to come out. It might be out within 24 hours. It is because of technology that we're having a Zoom call, although we are in the lockdown. It's because of technology that our children can still continue with the home-based learning even though they're not going to school. So I think technology has definitely found its boundaries and its space and its application at a much rapid rate. But I guess at the same time, there's something that was not happening before it's happening now. With all that focus and drive towards technological advancement, the one thing that I guess we did forget was our roots and who we are at the core of humanity. I think we were allowing technology to use us or overwhelm us. Today we are using technology for the right reasons. We're seeing the applications of all those developments today. I don't know. Let's see. Malminder, what do you have to say, buddy?
So I agree generally with that, Rahul. I mean, technology has both its pros and cons, and it's as much an aid as it is a challenge for us. And I think just to zoom in on the point that Faheema brought up earlier about parenting and how parents today are saying that it's challenging to work from home. And I think the reason for that also is because we have blurred the lines between work and home. Where clearly in the past, in our parents' generation and certainly before that, these were clearly segregated. Today, because of technology, these are no longer segregated. I mean, I personally am guilty of it. I find myself at home, while my kids are trying to get my attention, still, trying to send off that email or replying to a Slack chat or something like that. And it's just never enough. So you have to just draw a line. And I think that's exactly where I was coming from earlier as well about, this being an act of God. And I just thought I'll share a bit about that as well, since, everyone has also shared their views on that. And I think I mean, some of you have said that it's a loss of connection. I totally agree. But where I slightly differ is that it's not just a loss of connection with each other and one another. It's a loss of connection with God that's happened. So, I mean, I think we need to accept, and certainly as a Sikh, we accept that this came from a larger purpose of God, and it's only God that has the power to create something like this. I mean, whether it came from a bat or a lab or whatever it is irrelevant to us. The thing that we need to accept and understand, at least from a Sikh point of view, is that there's a larger purpose to all of this, and that it has affected everyone, as some of you have mentioned. And the funny thing is that whatever everyone has to rely on before this, every form of support, everything that you were proud of, the source of your pride, now you no longer have, right? So while science has made great progress and it is helping us test people quickly, and it's helping people get discharged, but really we still don't have a vaccine. So science still can't be the solution to it as of now yet. And where the rich and the wealthy and the famous could rely on their money or their connections to get them out of difficulties in the past, now you can't. Whether you're rich or poor, once you get COVID, you are in it, right? There's no amount of money that can buy you, out of it, right? And neither can any connections with anyone, right? And even your own source of support, your social networks, even that has been cut off for you. And the reason for that is because I think over the years we have lost our connection with God. And whenever this has happened, I mean, as I think Faheema mentioned earlier as well, that over the course of history, this has happened several times, where we often get epidemics, pandemics, or natural disasters happen, where widespread pain happens. It's a restart. It's a course correction, because we lose our connection with God. We lose we have prioritized other things than the Creator. So some might say, "Oh, is he trying to teach us a lesson?" That sounds a bit, not so merciful as what God is supposed to be. But I think that's not the reason. The reason is actually to course correction. to get us back on the right track. And the reason also is to realize that, the fault lies with us in terms of that we are the ones who cause the things to reach to such a level. And I was just listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and somebody, an American university, which measures tremors of the earth. And it is amazing because in the last 1 month, the Earth's tremors have actually reduced to almost a negligible level. And from a metaphysical, meta-spiritual point of view, we often say that when there's too much burden on the Earth, that's when the Earth gives in, and that's when you have things that come back to remind you and to course correct. So it's amazing because the things that we relied on, whether it was alcohol, for some people, alcohol was a source of support. For some people, it was social networks, capital, whatever it is that we did, all has been taken away from us. So it's a reminder to us that there's only one source of support for each one of us, and that is God. And if we realize that, and we actually go to, whatever it is that we do, and we go and understand and ask for forgiveness, I think, there is a chance that, things won't be so bad for all of us. So that's my take on it, really.
Great, thank you so much. Rinchin, what's your take on this?
So when it comes to faith, we must understand that faith is something which is very personal. Even if you belong to the same religions, the two people will never have the same sort of faith, right? And we all can agree to that. At the same time, faith comes from our own interpretation of religion and spirituality as well. How I interpret Ramayana or Bhagavad Gita might be very different and extreme from somebody else, right? At this time, there's one concept in Bhagavad Gita. It's a scripture, a Hindu scripture that I've been researching on for a couple of years. And it's the concept of yoga, not the yoga that, we are used to seeing on TV or videos. It's not just about the body, but yoga means, connecting with the higher sense of self and connecting with the supreme consciousness, being at one with everything in the world. There's a concept of yoga, and yoga is basically of three types in that. There is a karma yoga. Again, not the karma that we talk about that, it's going to come back and bite to you, not like that. But karma is your constant actions, what you're doing right now, and not thinking about, what fruits it would bring to you or how it is going to, what effect it's going to have on you. I think that somewhere plays a very important role in current scenario. If we keep thinking of our karma at this time, which is just social distancing, and keep constantly at it without worrying about, okay, is it really going to help or not? Somewhere it is going to bring us, at least it's going to curb everything down, as the scientists say it. The second important part of it is called the Jnana Yoga, which is understanding or introspecting inside and looking at everything that is happening, or trying to interpret everything based on our own level of understanding and our own connection with the conscious. So at this time, I think this is the best time when we can actually sit down, if we can keep our phones away. We can just sit down and think about introspecting about it and trying to connect with the Supreme with the act of Jnana Yoga. And third is, of course, the Bhakti Yoga that most of us follow, which everybody has been talking about, which are, your religious practices or spiritual practices that you keep doing. So in Bhakti Yoga, it's all about devotion, again, without expecting anything in return. I think at this time, that is one of the most important things that we can again look at, because we can just pray. I mean, as everybody's saying, it's unpredictable. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But it's, faith that keeps you alive, that keeps you going at this time. I'll give you my personal example. I'm 9 months pregnant right now. I was expecting my parents to come over. There was this whole program of how everything's going to happen. But I know that at this time, if I keep thinking about, oh my God, everything is happening around me, I'm just going to lose my cool. Because in the end, it's just me and my husband who has to take care of everything. I cannot even think of tomorrow. All right, if tomorrow something happens, I'm again going to get into the mode of panic. depression, I don't know what all. But these three principles are something that are keeping me, going at this time. And I think that's where your own personal interpretation of faith is very helpful.
Great, thank you so much, Rinchin. So I've been hearing a lot of parallels, right? Whether it's from Fiona's perspective that's grounded in Buddhism, or Basil's perspective, which is influenced by his time as in training of the Catholic Church. Faheema's perspective from the Islamic perspective, or Malminder's from the Sikhism, or yours, Rinchin, from the Hindu scriptures, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or the Ramayana, the concepts of yoga and all. If I were to say that let us remove the term God from the dialogue, right? And you can replace it with whatever word that you want, just for the purpose of this conversation. And I always like to challenge people with this, because sometimes it's the term God becomes a very convenient term to use, because we are so conditioned to through our upbringing, through our religious beliefs, through social norms. It's so convenient to just say that, oh, God's will, God determined it, God will take care of it, but by the end of the day, I think if we remove for a while, just temporarily, with all due respect to that higher force and being, if we were to remove that term associated with that being and replace it with something else, what would you replace that with? What would be the another word that we would replace God with in our conversations? Rinchin, let's start with you. Everybody gets like one word to give, right? So, Rinchin.
For me, it's oneness with everything else.
Oneness with everything else. All right.
Yes.
Basil? Can't hear you. Just give me a moment. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Right. So if you don't mind, I might go with three words actually.
Sure.
Being, belonging, and beyond. And how I think being is quite common in how many people might refer to God. That sense of belonging is relationship with the divine. But in terms of this pandemic right now, I think there's very much that sense of the beyond, the transcendent, right? So something that in the Catholic faith we might call mystery. Somebody else earlier on said uncertainty and the unknown, that we are in that time. So for us, that darkness of uncertainty is mystery, but it leads us to that next step, the beyond. So those three words, being, belonging, and beyond.
Being, beyond, belonging, and beyond, right? Faheema.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm here. Okay. I'm thinking whether I'm going to get into trouble for saying certain things. Okay.
Again, this is with all respect intact to, yeah.
Yeah, by the way, people, this is a hypothetical question.
Yes,
so,
yes.
If I were to replace God with a word, I would just say it's me. Because
okay, that went mute. That like automatically went mute.
You see, that's what I call a divine intervention.
You want to repeat that?
Okay. Okay, so if I were to replace the word God, if I were to remove like the whole, the God concept out of faith, right? I would think I would replace myself, me. Because in Islam, right, it's firstly, belief is, it's very inner, it's you. It's something you can't compel, you can't compel someone or something. Secondly, it's a lifestyle. It comes with a lot of choices. God judges you and all, really it's at the end and he wills things to happen. So if you really minus it, what's left is how you make most of your life. You want to be a good person today, you want to be a bad person tomorrow, you want to be a mother who watches Netflix, you want to be a mother who teaches the kid home-based learning. It's really you. So I think if I were to remove God, I think I would sort of replace it with just me. That's it.
Nice. Thank you so much, Faheema. Fiona, how about you? Just unmute yourself, yeah? It's easier because I'm having a hard time scrolling up and down.
Okay, so when Rahul, you mentioned about if there's something higher that we can surrender to, I agree with Faheema, it's me, but I'll give you another perspective is compassion and wisdom. Compassion of those who have gone before us, those who have been enlightened before us, and the wisdom of how they actually go through whatever is happening in terms of difficulty and times of crisis. That's
Great.
my take.
So you replace the term God with compassion and wisdom, right? Great.
Yep.
Malminda.
Well, my initial answer would be nothing. So for me, it's God or nothing. But if you're going to press me, and I know Rahul, you're going to press me for answer. I would say, so in Sikhism, there's a concept called Sangat. And Sangat means congregation or holy congregation. And God has often created, at least in Sikhism, this concept of Sangat to say that when you are there, that you're part of the holy congregation. There's also another platform that's been created as a means of attaining salvation or being a savior, and that's joining the company of the saints. So finding people who may not be, who may be God in the ways of the God or godly ways or spiritual ways, and joining their congregation as well. So I would say these two words.
Nice. So I think if I were to hear everyone's responses across the board, there's certain similarities, right? Oneness. Malminda mentioned Sangat. Rinchin, you mentioned oneness. Faheema, you mentioned me or I, which again comes down to one, because if you look at who you are, you're usually a convergence of many different people who you encounter in your life. We are all products of every person who has passed by us. We are like the rock in the river, and every drop of the river has carved us in some way. So I think that's that idea of being one, being united, being together. And I think Basil mentioned belonging, right? And I think that's pretty evident in language. Whether someone prescribes to a particular religion or someone is an atheist, there is always that if you listen to the vocabulary of the language that a person speaks with, especially when it comes to discourses or discussions on faith and philosophy of life and approach to living, the identity part always comes to the fore, right? There'll always be that as Muslims, we believe this. As Sikhs, we believe this. As Hindus, we believe in this. As Catholics, as Christians, we believe in this. And Buddhists, we believe in this. It doesn't matter that a lot of these principles are universal. And therefore, I think everybody, it's a shared philosophy sometimes, not always expressed in the same manner. But I think the idea underlying a lot of it remains universally similar, right? If not the same. So in spite of that, there's always that sense of needing or wanting to distinguish, not distinguish because we want to say that we are better or we are beyond something, but it's because we feel like we belong to something and we want to project that sense of belonging, right? So I think that oneness and that need to belong are very strong. And I think in times of crisis, we see the same thing, right? We see people coming together. And that was a discussion that we had yesterday, how we keep peace in times of crisis. And I think we all acknowledge that there's this observation that people come together. Suddenly there are people who are awakened. There's more community efforts, there are more grounds up initiatives. There are people who want to go out there and do say, it might be a coping mechanism, or it might be true altruism and selflessness, right? I mean, we will never be able to judge that. But whichever way it is, people come forward and they say, I want to distribute sanitizers. I want to put a sanitizer in the lift. I want to distribute care packs to the frontline workers. And sometimes it gets to a point it becomes irrational because everybody is delivering food to the hospitals and the nurses can only eat so much in the little time that they have. But the people still want to do it, right? Because they want to feel involved in giving and coming together. It's the whole idea that everyone can come together, unite to contribute, and in doing so, feel like they belong in that movement, which is why I guess the hashtag SG United has been doing so well, because it's a sense of belonging. Or in other countries, they might have something similar. So coming together, unity and belonging, I guess, are something that becomes a natural instinct every time something brews, trouble brews. And which is why spiritualism, religion, culture, tradition, these things only become more amplified in times of crisis like this. The question really is, what do the scriptures tell us? What do the religions tell us? If I were to say that, hey, which is why I said if you were to replace the term God, right, because that gives us a more universal platform to discuss this, right? Whether we are discussing from a point of compassion or wisdom or point of, oneness, point of congregation and unity and belonging. What are some stories? What are some analogies? What are some metaphors? What are some quotes and references that you have come across in your own respective readings or somebody else's readings that you have come across? What are some of this that I think people who are joining us or who will be watching this video can draw inspiration from? I'm going to start with you, Basil, because I know that the Bible has a lot to say on this, as do every other scripture as well. But it's just there's so many stories in the Bible, so I'm just going to start with that for that reason.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, there is so much. Malvinder mentioned this sense of a reset, right? Throughout the whole of scriptures, at least with the interpretations that I've been taught, right? There's this thing known as salvation history, looking at all these covenants that God or being has created with humankind. And at each time, there's this major issue, this whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's some type of struggle, some type of conflict or war, there's a sort of a new humanity that's created, right? And it almost feels as though it's God pressing the reboot button, on his computer, right? And then that for us, for Catholicism at least, we believe with Jesus, right? With himself taking on the pains of humankind and dying, right? And then with what we know as his resurrection, that's one of those reboot buttons as well. It's that this representation of man, right? Died and then came back to life again, new life, which is a lot of what we are looking into, I think. Two stories that come to mind. One is just Jesus, even in the midst of his, just before he begins his ministry work in the scriptures, he actually goes out into the desert by himself, right? And basically he was self-isolating, right? And then there he's struggling, he's going through his temptations, his thoughts, his struggles, whether to go on with, to start this mission or not, on what's he supposed to do, what's he called to do, right? And in the midst of that struggle out there in the empty desert places, and then he comes back renewed, and he's got this mission that he follows through with, that he brings to humankind. So that's one at the beginning of his ministry. But at the end of his ministry as well, which is really appropriate to share this week because Catholics and Christians all around the world are celebrating Holy Week, right? There's Good Friday and then there's Easter Sunday. So if Good Friday, it's this person that Christians refer to as God, right? Jesus dying, right? And he's going into that unknown, that uncertain, that darkness, that mystery again. And what's relevant to us here is that his community, his disciples, are now separated from him. And because of all the troubles at that time and the persecutions that they were going through, they were basically self-isolating as well. They were stuck, they were hidden in this upper room, right? And in case the Roman soldiers came looking for them, or even the Jewish, the people who are connected to the temple, the high priest and those soldiers come looking for them, right? But then, right, after that period of darkness, Jesus resurrects. That sense of new life, that sense of a new beginning and a new humanity. So those are two stories that come to mind immediately and really appropriate now. I think right now with Good Friday, right, with all the churches being closed, that's the best way to celebrate Good Friday, I think. Okay, celebrate is the wrong word, but to commemorate Good Friday. You can't even go to church, right? So you can't even see your community members. What a perfect way. We've probably never had this opportunity in 2,000 years of Christianity to commemorate Good Friday the way the early disciples had to live it, right? Alone, hiding at home, separated from our community. And in a little bit of sense, even that sense of missing God, being distant from God even. Such a perfect opportunity to immerse ourselves in this story.
Such a beautiful example, Basil. I think thank you for sharing that. It really sets the context, I think, for the conversation moving forward, that this was something that happened 2,000 years or over 2,000 years ago. And we find ourselves in such similar situations today. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to hear the same thing from a lot of the rest of the panelists. So Faheema, because I think in many ways Islam has a shared history to the region at least. So what do you have to say about that? What are some things that we can get from the Holy Quran?
I can't think of a verse or this thing itself, but I think generally in Islam itself, you if you really focus, I tend to focus a lot on the history, on what the prophets went through. And be it what Prophet Lut or Prophet Noah went through in terms of when during that time it was believed that the world was sort of reinvented, right? And it's a common story that's across the biblical as well. I think that is something you kind of take. I was talking to someone yesterday, someone from the Christian this thing, and what he said also reminded me a lot of Prophet Noah's story and how the world had a chance to reinvent for a better future, right? Leave all the evil behind and move towards with the good, with what's necessary, not just the good, but what was essential. I think one of the things we were discussing was, now after this, are we going to move back and get, greedily to the same materialistic world because we want to rush back to how things are? Are we going to take this time to sort of, whatever good that's happening, let it sustain? I think 1 month is a very interesting period because usually it takes 1 month to form a habit. So we've got 1 month to make habit of certain things that we couldn't do. Take for example me. A lot of times when I'm outside working events, it's very difficult to establish this 5 times prayer thing, especially for a woman. Can't just go anywhere, just pray, you see. But ever since I've been at home, it has become a little bit more routine for me. So again, that habit of keeping that, sustaining it is one. I think right now a lot of people agree that the air quality seems much more better, and there's a lot of environmental good that is coming up. So for me, I think I will learn from the Prophet Noah story, how after that it was believed that what was necessary for the world to carry on in the right way was sort of reintroduced. So instead of I'm going to be at home for 1 month kind of attitude, why not take this 1 month to really make things better? So, because a lot of changes we make now and post this circuit, whatever amount it's been going to be extended, could make a lot of difference for the future, for the future of people. A lot of things on how we are going to do things is going to set the tones for our kids. So I think one thing I definitely want to sort of think people can, not just the Muslims, even the other friends of the book, or even the non-Muslims. So I think the Noah story is something good to go back to and just check. I mean, now there's movies and all on it, right? So.
Indeed. I think some very interesting movies. In fact, when Basil was sharing earlier, and some of you were sharing earlier, I was just remembering this movie I finished watching yesterday, Two Popes. I highly recommend everybody to watch it. It's an amazing movie. So much to learn from. Malminder, let's hear from you, buddy.
Okay, so it's interesting. I mean, I think in the Sikh history, pandemics have featured quite a fair bit. 2 of our gurus, our 7th guru and our 8th guru. So we have had 10 gurus who have come in the human form, and then we have now the Guru Granth Sahib, which is a compilation of scriptures, which is our 11th guru. So the 7th and 8th guru, who are both quite young in age, both dealt with pandemics in their lifetime. In fact, our 8th guru, Guru Harkrishan Sahib, perished in the pandemic of smallpox in India. So what was interesting was that the message that he sent was that despite the pandemic, his seva, his service of people never stopped. And that's something that as a community we try to take reference to, which is why despite the lockdown, despite the various measures in Singapore and everywhere else in the world, I'm proud to say that the Sikh community around the world is still doing one thing, and that's we've not stopped feeding people. We've not stopped langar. So even in Singapore last weekend, when the order came out to close places of worship, we made a plea to the authorities to say, look, we will close the place of worship to the public, but please allow us some volunteers to go in every day to cook food so that we can distribute this to the people who need the food. And I think that's very important because it's a service to mankind. So while the pandemic also, as Faheema mentioned, is an opportunity, right? So it's an opportunity to not only correct ourselves, but to also continue to and up our service of mankind. And I think that's the message I would like to leave with everyone.
Great. And there have been such overwhelming, such inspiring stories that have been coming out from the Sikh community, from the other communities with so much of grounds up initiatives. With people giving out food, water, masks, sanitizers, and I think that's really, really admirable, not only in Singapore but world over. I think the sense of humanity has really been amplified at this point in time, and we could not be in greater awe of what can happen when people truly come together with their sense of humanity awakened to this aspect. Rinchin, let's hear from you.
I have two verses to share and a concept to share. One verse that I'd like to share is from Bhagavad Gita, and it talks about intervention, the divine intervention. So it says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavitti bharato abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamahe, which means that whenever the earth is in danger and dharma is not being followed, and by dharma I don't mean Hindu dharma, I mean dharma in terms of following a righteous way of living, then there's a reset button which is again pressed by the higher consciousness. I think that is one concept which is actually applying to the entire events that we are going through. Second concept that I want to share is again the concept of karma, which is about us thinking of how we are conducting ourselves at this time, and whether we'd want to conduct ourselves in the same way or whether we want to be more responsible tomorrow. Again, without having only a thought of our own individual profits and benefits, but looking at more from a global level, not just for the humans, but the whole environment. And the third and the last thing is a wish and a prayer, which is global, because Hindu Dharma does not differentiate in terms of whether you are human or animal or tree or plant. Everybody is equal. So it's a prayer called Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarme Badrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukbhag Bhave, which means may everybody be healthy, happy, prosperous, and nobody face any kind of pandemics or epidemics anytime. So these are the three things that I'd like to share from the Dharma perspective here.
Thank you, Rinchin. Wonderful. We're beginning to see a bit of a pattern here. Fiona, can we hear from you? Fiona, you're still mute. Sorry, I mean you're muted. Yeah. Can't hear you still, Fiona. Did Fiona just leave us?
She's coming back.
She's back. She's back. So Fiona had to go off on a pilgrimage, get the wisdom, and now she's back. That's a very quick one. And we still can't hear you, Fiona.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, so was there a lesson in that for all
Okay,
of
I'm
us?
so sorry.
That sometimes you gotta
I'm
really
so sorry.
listen to the silence before we can get the wisdom.
Yeah, I wanted to share something before I share the verse with you to give you some context. So in terms of what I've learned in my life is that everything there's a cause and effect. So what we are really experiencing, the effect side of things, to be separated from other people and all that, there are a lot of causes to it, but one of the main cause that's really creating this is okay, I have to put it very straightforward because it's selfishness. Okay, so what does selfishness really mean? In a sense that we have been very absorbed or self-indulgent in the things that we have in our everyday life, and because of that, creating the environment that we are commonly seeing and experiencing together. So that's what in Buddhism we believe in cause and effect. So coming back to the verse that I wanted to share is by actually Arya Nagarjuna. So he's one of a very high spirit teacher, and also someone who actually founded the Mahayana Buddhism, one track of the Buddhism. And for him, he actually shared this verse with me, and it reminded me of how we should lead our life, especially in times like this, which is money comes from giving, happiness comes from being kind, beauty comes from patience, and leadership comes from enjoying all our work. Peace comes from meditation, and freedom actually comes from wisdom. And on top of it all, and love accomplishes all these goals. So the act of love and all the giving that everybody has been doing it now is because of this crisis. We created an opportunity for all of us to come together and be united for one common cause, which is for us to regain back our freedom, for example, for us to live a better life. So this is what really reminds me that in times and crisis, or some situations where you feel uncomfortable, reflect in ourselves and also to look at how we are actually treating people around us.
Wonderful, yep. Fiona, thank you. I would just like to say that I think this is a very good note or a very good point to really wrap up this conversation. I mean, I would love to keep hearing your thoughts and perspectives all night long, but I'm pretty sure you guys have to head back to your families and your lives. So we're going to put this on pause here. We're not ending this. We're just putting it on hold. I might call you guys back on the panel again, maybe 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, to do a retake of the stock, do a restock take of how the society has progressed and how the situation has evolved and what new perspectives you have. I think that'll be pretty interesting to maybe come back together after 2 or 3 weeks and see what new discussions can come out of that. We'll pick up from where we are leaving off right now. But some beautiful, beautiful examples and verses and insights you have shared with regards to the various faiths. Not something I'd expected to go down this road, but I'm very glad that it did. For those who are joining in and for those who are going to be watching this video, I just want to give a bit of a context to this. No doubt that the panelists have been sharing a lot from scriptures and religions, but I guess a group of us that does not prescribe to one of this could also draw some lesson and inspiration from it by understanding that I think a lot of scriptures were actually works, were actually written, or when you reread them now, when we infer them, I think that we'll find a lot of underlying science in it, whether it's social sciences, behavioral sciences, philosophical sciences, psychology. There's a lot of that can be found, or the sciences of management. There's a lot of this wisdom that can be found in the scripture. So you don't have to believe in the religious aspect of it. But if we were to just understand that these are texts that have been around for thousands of years and hundreds of years, and the reason why they have been able to if we give it a living status, the reason why they've been able to live or exist for so long as they still remain relevant in today's society is because they are so connected to humanity and how we survive as human beings. And across all the 5 sharings that I have heard, 3 things have come up as a common thread that we can take away and walk away with as to something to build our faith and trust upon. That regardless of the scripture, regardless of the place of origin of that scripture and faith, at different times of history, they have each come to agreement without having to make a conscious effort to confer that every time we forget our path of righteousness, or every time our actions cause or trigger a situation that we will define as crisis today, we will need to reset, and to reset we'll need to take a pause. That we will, after that reset, we will continue we'll have to seek survival, so we'll have to find ways of surviving, and our efforts go towards survival at that point in time. And once we have been able to survive, the lessons that we learned in the course of survival, in the course of being in survival mode, is going to help us to grow and evolve. We are going to come out stronger, we're going to come out better, we're going to come up with more innovation, we're going to come up with a better version of ourselves, we're going to start serving humanity in a bigger manner. Whatever we do after that is going to be bigger, better, healthier, stronger. So I guess if we look at the part now that, look, we have already been forced into this lockdown situation, we have already been put into a reset format. What we are doing now, figuring out how to get about our lives and our businesses and manage our children and our families, our incomes and our finances, that's sorting out our survival. That's trying to figure out how to survive. And the moment we figure that out, once we come out of the situation, it's only going to strengthen us and make us better. So this is indeed an opportunity. It is definitely a dark night for a lot of our friends and people in the community out there who are struggling. And we acknowledge the struggle. We acknowledge that we do not want to be overly optimistic and say that, hey, don't worry, all is good, because I'm sure it's not. The pain is real for a lot of people. But I guess the consolation is at the end of that pain, if we manage to survive that, and if we put our efforts in surviving this, we are going to come out stronger. So thank you guys for this immensely valuable insights, sharings, perspectives. Very grateful for all of you. Please answer my calls if I call you guys back for the next discussion. Don't put me on ignore. Rinchin, all the best. You are at a very precious stage and journey right now. So wish best wishes and best of prayers for you and the coming one. If you ignore my call, I'll understand. Right, so
I'll still try not to. Thank you.
Right. So the rest of you guys, thank you so much. I think I'll just stop the recording here, and if we want to continue chatting, we can. If not, we can excuse ourselves for the evening. Good night.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.